In this lesson, we'll learn how to select objects and create shapes for the elevation. Now, the elevation is going to be the last drawing that we're going to be extracting out of this model, and it's going to follow a couple of similar things that we have already done between the plan and the section, since essentially we're following the same routine and doing the same things. But what I did want to show you is how certain objects can be utilized a little bit differently. In other words, we can use a combination of things to get quite interesting results, and that's what I'm going to show you in this lesson. So to start off with, let's open up the layer manager and let's just turn off the section layer, which has all of those objects that we extracted out for that section. We're now going to create another layer called elevation, and everything that we create is going to now go onto this elevation layer. So I'm going to make that visible, and we can start the process. So the elevation we're talking about is going to be looking at the long side of the building with the museum in the background, and we want to basically capture the museum as well as the building, the foreground, the water, and we basically want to understand the relationship between the two. So let's go ahead and start selecting all of the objects that we're going to be using. It's going to be the water, the plinth, the pavilions. Things like the columns are definitely going to be visible. The entire tower will be visible. Let's select the stairs as well. And over here we're going to be seeing the floor slab at the bottom, or in other words the ceiling edge, and we're going to see the top edge as well as the planting, and then we're definitely going to be seeing the top of this tower. And let's also go and select this museum in the background as well as the context. So the last thing that we need to select is this facade that we have in front here. And this is the one that we're going to do a little bit of work on so that we can get a better result. So first of all, I'm going to just select these side facades as well, since I do think that we will see some bulging in them. So we're going to include that. And let's now go and isolate this out. Now, what I was talking about with this front elevation, in other words, this molded facade, let's just have a look at it without the wireframe. You can see basically the shape that it has. It has this undulating bubble-like shape, and the idea is that we now want to find a way of representing this in elevation. If we went and did a flat shot or a flatten command or anything of that sort, we would actually end up getting all of this tessellation, and even if we removed the tessellation, if we went back into the previous files as we were modeling the building, we would still not really have the actual shape represented correctly. So what I'm going to show you in this lesson is just how you can use the section object that we created earlier when we were actually generating the section to create an interesting shape for that. So let's now go into our shapes section, and we're going to choose a section from here. I'm going to look at it in the front view, and I'm going to create a shape object. I'm just going to make it more or less the size of the facade so that we understand that it is covering the facade. And then in plan view, I'm going to be moving it more or less so it's intersecting with that facade. So now once you have a look at this, you will actually see what you're getting is basically as we move it forward and back, in other words, as we move it along the y-axis, you're going to see how this shape or the section changes as we go through this object. So in other words, we can choose how and where we want this section to be so that we have an accurate representation of what this bubble facade is supposed to look like. I pretty much like this one over here, and I think that if I just nudge it ever so slightly, that's going to work just fine. So this is basically now going to, if I create a shape, I'm going to be creating a facade shape that is going to represent what this bubble facade is doing. Now in terms of these side facades, I don't need to have this entire long object since it is repeated. So let's just go and extract out a small portion of it, and we can then go and invert that selection, Control-I, and delete the back edge of it. We can then in our model also go and mirror that to the other side. This one, however, has been instanced, so let's just go rather and do it twice for ourselves. Let's delete it here, and let's just do the same thing here rather, instead of instancing it in AutoCAD. I'm going to just select more of it, And I'm doing this just so that there is less detail to work with later in AutoCAD. I just want to reduce my model as much as possible. If you'd like to, you could even go and remove the back half of this entire tower. You could go and slice it off and then convert it down to editable poly. Do whatever you can so that your model is as simple as possible for you, so that you really have as little hassle as possible, so that you can get everything done easily and quickly. So I'm going to remove and delete this section object, and I'm just going to leave these splines in place, which are then going to be representing that facade. And in terms of all of these pavilions, we want to leave all of them in because you're going to see all of them in elevation. And pretty much I think that's what we need to have in place for that elevation to happen. So perhaps one of the things I can do here is I can come in and I can do a quick slice as well, just to cut through the water itself. Let's just go and convert that down to editable poly. Right click, quick slice again. Let's just quickly do a quick slice for ourselves. And I'm just going to delete the back edge of this water, again reducing everything as much as possible. And remember now, one of the things I'm doing, which is perhaps slightly incorrect, is that I'm actually working on the main model. I hadn't gone and made a copy for myself. I'm actually going and manipulating the base model itself, which I recommended not to do in the previous examples. But I know, since I'm going to be finishing this course, that I'm not going to need those models. But in your case, I think always try and keep your original models. Don't try and manipulate them. Or at least if you do, make sure that the model that you're busy editing, in other words, if you go and delete large chunks of your model, make sure that that isn't your final model. Create a separate model for yourself that you actually extract all of your sections, plans, and elevations from, just in case. You never know. So with all of these objects selected, you want to go and basically select them out. And we're going to export them in the way that we did it with the objects that we pulled out for our section. So we're going to go to Export Selected, and we're going to go into our project files, referenced files. This is going to be called Lesson 14. And I'm going to be creating a 14 extracted elevation. And basically once that is exported, I'm going to just hit pause now, and we're going to carry on with this video once I am in 3D Max and I've imported, scaled up, and have all those objects in place, just the way we had done with that elevation. And then we're just going to go through some of those steps again that we looked at once we are in 3D Max. So now we are in AutoCAD, and you can see that everything has been imported in. I just wanted to make a little note that the facade that we created here using that section tool was a spline. So therefore you can't export that and import that in as a SAT file because it's not a solid. So you will need to do that just as you did in the previous examples where we did the plans, where you are going to be using the DWG method. So you export it to DWG and then you import it in, you insert it in as a block. So the same process that we did before, and all of that has been covered already. So all of that falls into place once it is all brought together. And the next step that I'm going to do right now, and I'm going to do it before the next lesson, is to use the flatshot command again and just basically pull everything side to side. Use the flatshot command, move it all back together. Exactly the same process as what we had done for the section. The only difference now is that we're using different objects. We're looking at it from a different direction, but essentially the workflow is exactly the same. So I'm going to leave you here at the end of this lesson now, and I'm going to do those few actions onto this model, and then we're going to come back in the next lesson, still in AutoCAD, once we have all of these objects flattened out, and we can then continue to work on it and add height lines, section lines, and we can start to compile all of our drawings and see how everything starts to look all together.